Lydia Ashford knew she should have shut the door. She understood it clearly. That night would be paid for in blood, not in mercy. The wind was already howling when she reached for the shotgun, and the knock came again. Heavy, desperate, stripped of politeness. She opened the door and found a man frozen to the bone, clutching two bundled shapes that barely breathed. He didn't ask for charity. He asked for the barn. Just until morning. She said yes, and the world slipped off its track. In a small town, mercy travels faster than truth. Before dawn, whispers would cling to the ridge. Before the week was over, men fluent in law would brandish a deed clause to pry her land from her hands. And somewhere beyond the snow, a hired hunter would lift his head, catch the scent, and start riding. The man carried more than children. He carried a death he had never dared to name. Lydia carried a ledger sharp enough to cut through the law. Together, they would learn that barns can burn, papers can vanish, and home is something kept only by standing still and refusing to yield. Only one detail didn't fit. The ribbon wrapped around the babies bore a mark Lydia had seen before, many years ago, far from this ranch. Subscribe to the channel, stay with this story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so we can see how far this western travels. The pounding hit the door like a fist meant for bone, not wood. 3 heavy blows that shook the latch and sent a tremor through the thin glass panes. The wind outside screamed across the ridge, dragging fog low over the yard until the world beyond the porch became nothing but moving white. Lydia Ashford snatched the shotgun from its hooks without thinking, barrel rising before her breath did. The stove behind her gave a tired crackle. The kettle on top of it hissed once, offended at being forgotten. Frost snapped under the porch boards as another knock came, closer, urgent, like the night itself wanted in. No one rode this way after sundown. She held the gun tight to keep it from rattling. Her lamp sat on the table, flames small, stubborn. Lydia crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, boots quiet on the worn boards, and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Fog pressed against the window like a face with no features. Then a shadow moved, tall, unsteady, standing at the edge of her lantern's reach. A man's voice, ragged and careful, slipped through the cracks. "Ma'am, I don't mean no harm." Lydia did not answer. She flipped the latch with her thumb and opened the door a hand's width, the shotgun already there, the cold pouring in like a living thing. Fog spilled over the threshold, swallowing her boots. The man stood 1 step back, hat in his hands, shoulders drawn in as if he could shrink smaller than the wind. He was taller than the night had any right to allow, broad but worn down to angles. Stubble darkened his jaw. His cheeks were hollow. Mud and ice clung to his boots, and his coat was patched in 2 different colors, like it had outlived the man wearing it. And in his arms, 2 bundles. Not sacks, not cargo. Blankets wrapped tight around something too small to be real. The bundles shifted. A thin sound leaked out, a faint wet cough swallowed by the wind. The man's eyes lifted to her gun. He didn't flinch. He just looked tired in a way that said he'd already flinched enough for a lifetime. "Can we sleep in your barn, ma'am?" he said, voice breaking on the word barn like it was the last honest thing left in him. "It's cold. I walked all day. They're freezin'." Lydia's lamp threw a pale halo over his hands. and she saw how carefully he held the bundles, like a man trying not to crack the only thing he had left. Her mouth went dry. She aimed the shotgun lower, not away, just lower enough to breathe around it. "Step back," she said. He did, immediately. A half step, then another, until he stood at the edge of the porch light like he was afraid to stain it. "What's in the blankets?" Lydia asked. The man swallowed. "My boys." A gust hammered the side of the house. The shutters groaned. Lydia stared past him into the yard. No horse tied to the rail, no wagon silhouette, no lantern swinging out at the road. Just the fog and the sound of something small struggling for air. "How old?" she asked. 6 months, he said. Then, like the truth hurt his tongue, he added, "Twins." Lydia's grip tightened. Her hands did not shake. She'd learned not to waste shaking on things that wouldn't change. She studied his boots, mud-caked, soles worn thin. Studied the satchel strap biting into his shoulder. Studied his eyes, bloodshot, stubborn, pleading without asking for mercy. I should shut the door. The thought was clean and simple, like a law written in stone. And she'd lived by laws for a reason. "You're not coming in my house," she said. The man nodded as if he'd expected worse. "Yes, ma'am." "There's a barn out back," Lydia went on, voice flat, steady. "Dry straw in the north corner. Wool blankets in the tack box. You lay down out of the wind. You're gone at first light." Relief hit his face so hard it looked like pain. His shoulders dropped. For a moment he swayed, and Lydia saw what the night had been doing to him. How it had been chewing him down to the last scrap of will. "Thank you," he said, and the words came out like something turned loose. "Thank you, ma'am. I swear—" "Don't swear," Lydia snapped, because swearing didn't keep babies warm. "Just go." He bowed his head, hat pressed to his chest, and turned carefully, each step measured so the bundles wouldn't jolt. He moved off the porch and into the fog, swallowed by it in 3 strides, like the world had decided he belonged to the dark. Lydia closed the door. The latch clicked like a verdict. She stood there with the gun still in her hands, listening. The house settled around her. The stove breathed. The kettle hissed again, impatient. Her own breath rose white in front of her lips before it vanished into warm air. From somewhere out back, through layers of fog and wood and distance, came a sound so small it barely counted as sound at all. A thin, weak cry. Then a cough. Then silence. Lydia set the shotgun against the wall, but did not step away from it. She walked to the table, poured cold coffee into a tin cup, because hot coffee required a piece she didn't have, and drank without tasting. Outside, the wind scraped along the house like it was looking for a seam. She told herself she'd done enough. She told herself her father's land didn't care about strangers, only about fences and feed and snow. She told herself the barn was shelter. The straw was dry. The blankets were there. Then another cough broke the night. Closer now. Or maybe she was just listening harder. Lydia's jaw tightened. Her lamp flame wavered as if the house itself had flinched. She stared at the window until she could see her own reflection, pale and rigid, like a woman carved out of stubborn. The memory of those bundles, too small, would not leave her hands. She grabbed the lamp. Her coat hung by the door. She didn't put it on. She stepped into the night with the shawl still around her shoulders and the cold biting straight through it. Frost cracked under her boots as she crossed the yard. The fog wrapped around her legs. Her lamp carved a narrow tunnel through the white. The barn stood at the edge of her property like a dark tooth. She reached it and pulled the door open. The smell hit first: hay, old leather, damp wood, and that sharp, clean scent of winter that meant the world was trying to kill you. Her lamp lifted, and the light found him. The man sat braced against a haystack, back to the wall, knees drawn up. His coat was open, draped over both bundles like a roof. His head was bent low, mouth moving. He was humming. Not pretty, not steady. A broken thread of a tune. The kind a person hums when there's nothing left but rhythm and prayer. One bundle shifted. A tiny fist pressed against the blanket and fell back again. The other was too still. The man's eyes snapped up at the creak of the door. Panic flashed there. Raw, instant. He tried to stand, but his legs didn't obey on the first attempt. "Ma'am," he rasped. Lydia stepped forward, lamp raised, and saw what the porch light hadn't shown her. The baby's cheeks were red in a feverish way, not a warm way. One of them had a mouth slightly open, breath thin enough to be stolen by a whisper. The other's lips had a bluish cast that made Lydia's stomach drop. She did not hesitate. Hesitation was for people with help nearby. "Give me the babies," she said. The man blinked like he hadn't heard right. "Ma'am, you said—" "I know what I said," Lydia cut in. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Give me the babies." He held tighter for half a heartbeat. Not defiance. Fear. Then his shoulders collapsed. He peeled the bundles out of his coat, with hands that shook from cold and exhaustion, and something worse: the terror of letting go. His fingers brushed Lydia's as he passed them over, and she felt how hot his skin was despite the frost. Fever heat born of too much walking and too little rest. She cradled one in each arm. They were heavier than they should have been, not with weight, but with consequence. The weak one made a tiny sound against her shawl, like a breath scraping a dry leaf. The man rose behind her, hat clutched to his chest, eyes fixed on the babies as if looking away might be the moment they stopped. "You're coming inside," Lydia said. His throat worked. I don't want trouble, ma'am." "You already got it," she replied, and the words tasted like iron. "Inside. Now." He followed her through the fog, step for step, as if afraid she might vanish. Lydia's lamp swung with each stride, its light shaking over the frozen yard. The house loomed warmer than it had any right to, smoke curling from the chimney into the fog like a signal to God. At the door, Lydia didn't look back. She shoved it open with her shoulder, carried the babies straight to the stove, and laid them on a thick quilt spread on the floor. The firelight licked at their blankets. Their tiny chests rose and fell, one steady enough to believe, one so faint it made Lydia's pulse jump. The man dropped to his knees beside them, hands hovering, not touching, like he didn't trust himself not to break them. Lydia set the lamp on the table. She filled the kettle. Her movements were quick and clean, the kind you make when there isn't room for emotion. "What's your name?" she asked without turning. A pause. Then, "Reed," he said softly. "Reed Callahan. And theirs?" Reed's voice cracked. Tate. And Tobin. Lydia poured hot water into a tin mug, dropped in a pinch of salt, then grabbed a clean cloth and soaked it. She pressed the warm cloth gently against the blue-lipped baby's chest, watching for the smallest change, the smallest proof that warmth could win a fight like this. Reed watched her hands like they were scripture. "You got any family?" Lydia asked. Reed's answer came too fast. "No, ma'am." It slid into the room and settled there, heavy, too smooth to be true. Lydia didn't call it out. Not yet. She had bigger things to keep breathing. Outside, the wind struck the house again, hard enough to rattle the window glass. Lydia glanced toward the door, where the shotgun leaned within arm's reach. The night felt restless, like it knew it had lost something and intended to come back for it. Reed bowed his head over the babies, lips moving without sound. Maybe it was prayer. Maybe it was apology. Maybe it was both. In the stove, the fire popped, and for a moment the flames flared bright enough to throw Reed's shadow tall against the wall. One man, two children, and a home that had been too quiet for too long. Lydia laid another blanket over the twins and watched the blue leave one tiny mouth by a fraction you had to be desperate to notice. "Listen," she said, voice low, not unkind, not soft either. "You sleep on the rug by the stove. The boys stay where I can see 'em. You touch that back room or that cabinet, or my door latch." "I won't," Reed said, fast and sincere. "I swear to God, I won't." Lydia's eyes flicked to the small wooden cross above the stove. Her mother had nailed it there years ago, back when she still believed a home could keep out anything the world carried. Lydia hadn't prayed in a long time, but tonight, with two babies fighting for breath on her floor, the air felt thin enough that heaven didn't seem as far away. "Don't swear," she said again, quieter now. "Just live through the night." Reed lowered himself onto the rug, careful as if the boards might shatter. He lay on his side facing the babies, one arm stretched near them without touching, his hand open like an offering. Lydia sat at the table with her back straight, hands wrapped around her tin cup. The coffee had gone cold. She drank it anyway. Somewhere deep inside the house, the old clock ticked, steady, indifferent. Outside, the fog pressed close to the windows, and Lydia realized with a cold clarity that felt like a prayer spoken backward that the hardest part wasn't letting him in. The hardest part would be what came looking once morning learned where they were. The first gray of morning didn't come gentle. It arrived like a thin blade, slipping under the curtains and cutting across the floorboards in a line so pale it hardly counted as light. The wind had not died in the night. It had only grown tired of shouting and switched to a lower, meaner hiss along the eaves. Lydia hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen table with her shawl still around her shoulders, the tin cup empty. The shotgun still leaned in the corner where she could reach it without standing. The stove had burned down to coals, a dull red eye under ash. Every so often it popped, and each pop made her hand tighten around nothing. On the rug by the stove, Reed lay curled on his side like a pin braced for a blow. He hadn't taken his boots off. One arm remained stretched toward the quilt where the twins slept, his fingers open, not touching them, but close enough that the heat of his skin might matter. Tate made a sound first. Thin, hungry, stubborn. Tobin followed with a cough that dragged up from deep in his chest like it had to climb a hill to be heard. Lydia watched their tiny chests rise and fall, and measured each breath the way she measured feed and fence posts. Not with hope, but with count. Reed's eyes opened without him lifting his head. He looked at Lydia like he'd been waiting for a verdict. "Morning," he rasped. Lydia didn't answer the greeting. She stood, moved to the stove, and fed it 2 pieces of kindling until the flame caught again. Then she filled the kettle from the sink, set it on the heat, and turned. "Hands," she said. Reed blinked. "Ma'am?" "Your hands." Lydia pointed. "Wash 'em." He pushed himself up, slow, careful, as if quick movement might steal the baby's warmth. He crossed to the sink and held his hands under the pump water, scrubbing with the rough bar of soap until his knuckles went red. He didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He acted like a man who understood rules were the price of shelter. Lydia watched the water run brown, then clearer. "Sit," she said, nodding to the chair closest to the table, the one that kept him in her light, not behind her. Reed sat. The kettle began to hiss. Lydia pulled oats from the barrel and poured them into a small pot with a practiced hand. Milk, salt. Her spoon moved in steady circles, the sound of it scraping tin as rhythmic as a prayer. Reed's eyes never left the quilt. "They're breathing better," he said quietly. Lydia didn't look at him. "One is." His jaw tightened. He swallowed. "Tobin's the quiet one. Always been." "Quiet ain't always strong," Lydia said, and the words landed flat. Not cruel, just true. Reed nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." The word ma'am sounded different in daylight. In the dark, it was pleading. In the morning, it was obedience. Lydia ladled the porridge into a tin bowl and slid it across the table toward him. She set a second bowl down on her side, but didn't touch it. "Eat," she said. Reed stared at the bowl like he didn't trust it to stay real. Then he lifted the spoon, took a bite, and closed his eyes for half a second, as if the warmth was too much to hold in his mouth without breaking. He ate in careful mouthfuls, pausing every few bites to glance at the twins, as if counting their breaths along with his own. Lydia watched that pause, watched that instinct. A man who meant harm didn't waste hunger on checking a baby's chest. "Where'd you come from?" she asked. Reed swallowed. "East." "That ain't a place." He kept his voice low. "Missouri, near the river." Lydia stirred her own bowl without eating. "Why you walking across Wyoming in November with 2 infants and no horse?" Reed's spoon stopped midair. He looked down at the porridge like it had suddenly turned to stone. "I had a horse," he said after a beat. "Sold it. Bought milk powder and cloth and days." "And ran out of days," Lydia said. He didn't deny it. His eyes flicked to the door, the latch, the rifle in the corner, then back to the babies. "I didn't come to trouble you," Reed said. "I'm gone as soon as the frost breaks, and you ain't going nowhere with that one breathing like it's climbing out of a well," Lydia cut in, nodding toward Tobin without turning her head. "Not today." Reed's shoulders loosened with relief, and then tightened again like he'd realized what relief cost. "Ma'am," he began, and there was something behind his voice now, fear that sounded like gratitude's twin. Lydia raised a hand. "Don't." The kettle hissed again. She poured hot water into a mug, set it on the table between them, and slid a clean cloth beside it. "Warm his chest," she said. Not his face, not too hot. Slow. Reed obeyed like she'd handed him a rope in deep water. He moved to the quilt and knelt beside the twins. He lifted Tobin, gentle, and pressed the warm cloth to the baby's chest, humming under his breath again, a broken tune with no words. Lydia watched him for a long moment, then turned away to pull on her coat. Not the heavy town coat she used when she had to walk past people and their opinions. The ranch coat, plain, dark, thick at the shoulders, built for wind and work. She tied her hair back tight. Reed looked up when he heard the buckle. "You're sending me out?" he asked. "I'm giving you work," Lydia said. "There's a bunkhouse out back. Roof leaks, floors full of mouse droppings. You patch the roof, sweep it out, and you chop the rest of the wood on my porch." Reed blinked like he'd misheard the shape of mercy. You want me to stay?" he said. "I want my roof patched and my wood chopped," Lydia replied, voice level. "You do that. You earn warmth. That's how this works." Reed nodded, fast. "Yes, ma'am. Anything." Lydia grabbed a spare sling from the peg, old canvas, reinforced at the seams, and tossed it to him. "Strap 'em to your chest when you go out. Keep their faces covered from wind, not their mouths." Reed caught it like it was gold. Then Lydia stepped toward the pantry and stopped. She hadn't planned to do it. She did it anyway. She crossed to the corner of the room where Reed's satchel sat against the wall, exactly where he'd left it last night when she told him. It hadn't moved. Lydia stared at it a second too long, then picked it up and carried it into the small storage closet near the back. She shut the door and turned the key. Reed watched her. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with understanding. "You don't trust me," he said softly. Lydia didn't soften. "You're a stranger." He held her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." She set the key on the table where she could see it. "You need something out of there, you ask." Reed swallowed whatever pride was left in him. "Yes, ma'am." The twins fussed. Tate kicked his tiny legs, impatient at being awake. Tobin's cough returned, weaker than last night, but still there like a warning bell. Reed strapped them to his chest, one on each side, their blankets tucked tight. He adjusted them with hands that moved like he'd done it 100 times. When he stood, his back straightened without him meaning to. A man holding babies walked different. He had to. Lydia opened the back door for him. Cold air knifed in. Reed paused on the threshold. He looked down at the babies, then back at Lydia. "Thank you," he said. This time it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a vow. Lydia didn't answer with a blessing. She answered with a rule. "You don't go to town," she said. Reed blinked. "I wasn't—" "You don't go near the road," Lydia continued. "You don't speak to riders. You don't open the front door. You stay where I can see you." Reed nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He stepped into the morning and disappeared into fog that still clung to the yard, though thinner now, like it was embarrassed to be seen in daylight. Lydia watched him cross to the bunkhouse, an old one-room building with a slanting roof and a door that never fit right. She watched him set the babies inside first, right near the small stove, then come back out and climb onto the roof without complaint. His hammer struck steady. The sound carried across the yard like proof that a man could still build something, even when he'd been worn down to nothing. Lydia stood at the window, one hand on the sill, the other rested on the table near the key. She told herself this was practical. Work for shelter, labor for food, a temporary arrangement until the frost broke. Then she saw it, farther down the property line, near the road. A dust trail. Faint, but real. The kind of trail that meant hooves. Lydia's shoulders tightened. A rider appeared out of the white, moving slow, not hurried, like he belonged on her land without asking. She didn't step outside. She didn't wave. She simply reached for the shotgun. The rider came closer until Lydia could see the shape of him. Young, lean, with a county badge catching pale sunlight at his chest. He swung down from his horse, tied the reins to her fence post like it was ordinary, and walked up to her porch. The knock this time was polite. Lydia opened the door just enough to make a point. "What do you want, Eli?" Deputy Eli Mercer tipped his hat. His cheeks were red from wind, his eyes curious in the way youth always is. "Mornin', Miss Ashford," he said. "Sheriff Ketter sent me out. Said to ask if you saw a man walkin' this way yesterday." Lydia didn't blink. Lot of men walk the world. Eli's gaze slid past her shoulder into the kitchen. His eyes landed on the quilt by the stove, on the tiny shapes under it, on the cradle she'd pulled out of storage and set near the heat without even realizing she'd done it. His brows lifted just a fraction. He looked back at Lydia. "Didn't know you had company," he said carefully. Lydia's grip tightened on the door edge. "I don't." Eli glanced toward the yard where Reed was on the roof, hammering. The babies were inside the bunkhouse. Eli couldn't see them, but he could see the way Lydia stood, like a woman guarding a line. He smiled a little, not cruel, but not kind either. "Folks in town got eyes," he said, "even when they act like they don't." Lydia leaned forward a hair. "If this is a warning, spit it out." Eli hesitated. His gaze flicked to the shotgun barrel visible behind the door, then back to her face. "There's talk," he admitted, "about your place being quiet too long, about papers, about relatives asking questions." Lydia's jaw set. "Which relatives?" Eli's mouth twitched. He didn't need to say the name. That was the problem with small towns. Names traveled faster than truth. He cleared his throat. "Sheriff said if you needed anything, you could send word." Lydia held his gaze. "I don't need anything." Eli tipped his hat again, but his eyes stayed sharp. "All right, ma'am." "Ma'am." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving a ribbon of dust behind him, like a message written in air. Lydia shut the door and latched it hard enough that the frame trembled. She stood there a moment, listening to the fading hoofbeats, the hammer on the roof, the thin sound of a baby stirring by the stove. It wasn't even noon yet, and the world had already found them. "I should have left him in the barn." The thought came uninvited, sharp as ice. She swallowed it down and turned back to the stove, feeding the fire like it was something she could control. Behind her, the babies made a soft sound, alive. Outside, Reed's hammer kept striking, steady as a heartbeat. And somewhere down the road, a town was beginning to remember how to talk. By noon, the fog had thinned into long white fingers clinging to the low places, and the sun, pale and distant, hung over Ashford Ridge like it wasn't sure it belonged. The wind eased enough to let sound carry. Lydia heard Reed's hammer stop, She heard him cough once, then again, then go quiet. She did not rush. Rushing made mistakes loud. Lydia poured water into a basin and carried it to the back door. Reed stood just outside, hat off, breath steaming. The twins were strapped to his chest again, tucked tight beneath his coat. Tate fussed, hungry and offended by the cold air. Tobin slept, mouth parted, breath thin but there. Reed took the basin without being asked. "Roof's patched," he said. "It'll hold till spring." "Floor?" Lydia asked. "Cleaned, stove works. I'll finish the wood before dark." She nodded once and turned back inside. Reed followed, careful not to bring snow in on his boots. He moved like a man who understood the cost of being noticed. Lydia set bread on the table. Not much. Enough. She cut it clean and pushed half toward him. He hesitated. "For me?" "For the work you did," she said. "Eat it slow." He did. Lydia watched his hands while he ate. Strong hands, scarred in the way that came from rope and cold iron, not knives. He tore the bread and chewed, then paused to adjust the sling when Tate kicked. The movement was automatic, practiced. She went to the closet, turned the key, and opened the door just long enough to set a sack of oats inside. She didn't touch Reed's satchel. Not yet. "After you eat," she said, "you take the boys back inside the bunkhouse. Keep the stove low. If one of them coughs bad, you bring him straight in. Don't wait." "Yes, ma'am." The word still stood between them like a fence. Outside, a wagon creaked on the road. Lydia's head came up. The sound slowed, then stopped. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain back a finger's width. Mrs. Dorothea Pike stood at the gate, bundled in gray, her hair pinned tight beneath her hat. She held a basket like she always did, as if bringing something to someone was the only way to cross a line without asking. Dorothea looked toward the house, then toward the bunkhouse, then back again. Her eyes were sharp. They missed little. Lydia opened the door before the knock could come. "Dorothea," she said. "Abby," Dorothea replied, using the name Lydia hadn't heard much since she'd left St. Louis. It landed heavier than ma'am. "Cold night." "Winter does that." Dorothea stepped inside, set the basket on the table, and let her gaze travel. She saw the cradle. She saw the extra bowl. She saw Reed, silent now, standing near the door with the twins pressed to his chest like a shield. "I heard coughing," Dorothea said mildly. "Thought I'd bring syrup and cloth. Babies don't wait for permission." Lydia didn't thank her. She didn't refuse either. Dorothea crossed to the cradle and peered down at Tobin. Her mouth tightened. "This one's working for his air." "Yes," Lydia said. Dorothea reached into her basket and pulled out a small bottle wrapped in paper. "Pine and honey. Warmed, not hot. Slow." Reed watched her hands like a drowning man watches a rope. Dorothea straightened and looked at him then. Really looked. "You're a long way from Missouri," she said. Reed stiffened. "Yes, ma'am." Dorothea's eyes flicked to Lydia. Back to Reed. "Names?" "Reed," he said. "Callahan." "And the little ones?" "Tate. Tobin." Dorothea nodded as if filing it somewhere she could reach later. "People talk," she said, turning to Lydia. "They always do. but they talk faster when they smell a story. Lydia's jaw set. There's no story here. Dorothea smiled, thin and knowing. That's never stopped one. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Your cousin was in town yesterday. Lydia felt the name before she heard it. Hale. The land knew it. The fence posts remembered. Which one? Lydia asked. Dorothea didn't need to answer. Barton's sniffing around the courthouse, asking about dates, asking about deeds. Reed shifted his weight. Lydia saw it from the corner of her eye. Dorothea went on. You know the clause. Yes, Lydia said. I wrote it down myself when Father died. Dorothea's brows lifted. Then you know what they'll say. They can say it, Lydia replied. They'll have to prove it. Dorothea studied her for a moment, then turned back to the babies. These boys ain't a sin, she said quietly, but folks will use 'em like one. Reed opened his mouth. Lydia cut him off with a look. Thank you for the syrup, Lydia said. We're fine. Dorothea gathered her basket. At the door, she paused. Court meets Thursdays, she said. Paper travels faster than truth, and men with ink don't like to lose. Then she was gone, the sound of her boots fading into the yard. Silence filled the house again, thicker now. Reed spoke first. I don't want to put you in trouble. You already did, Lydia said, not unkindly. Sit. He did. Lydia went to the closet again. This time she took Reed's satchel out and set it on the table between them. She didn't open it. She just rested her hand on the worn leather. What's in here? She asked. That you don't want me to see? Reed's eyes flicked to the door, the window, the babies. He breathed in, slow, and out again. Nothing that hurts you, he said. That ain't an answer. He nodded. I know. Lydia opened the satchel. Inside were clothes folded too tight to be casual, a small tin of powder, a knife wrapped in cloth. No money to speak of. And beneath it all, folded small and creased soft from handling, a scrap of paper. Lydia picked it up and unfolded it. Don't tell anyone their real birthday. No signature. Just that. She looked up. Reed was very still. Why? Lydia asked. Reed swallowed. Because the day they were born, he said slowly, is the day their mother died. The room seemed to lean in. How? Lydia asked. Reed's eyes dropped to the paper. Does it matter? It matters if you're lying, Lydia said. He lifted his gaze. It held something hard now. I'm not. Lydia studied him, studied the way his hand hovered near the twins without touching, studied the way he didn't reach for the paper, didn't try to take it back. She folded the scrap and set it inside her ledger, not back in the satchel. Put the satchel back, she said. Reed obeyed. Outside, the sound of hooves came again, faster this time. 2 riders passed on the road without stopping. Lydia watched them through the window, counting heartbeats until they were gone. The afternoon wore thin. Reed finished the wood. He stacked it neat. Lydia noted the care. Not a man in a hurry. A man planning to stay alive. When dusk came, it came early. Lydia lit the lamps. Reed brought the twins inside. Tobin coughed again, weaker than before. Lydia warmed the syrup and fed it drop by drop while Reed held him steady, whispering something that sounded like thanks, but might have been a promise. As the fire settled and the night pressed close again, Lydia opened her ledger and began to write. Feed counts, repairs, dates, names. Names mattered. Outside, somewhere beyond the ridge, a horse whinnied. Another answered. Reed lay back down on the rug, the twins between him and the stove. He didn't sleep right away. Neither did Lydia. The house held its breath. And in town, words were learning where to go. The wind shifted sometime in the night, turning sharper, meaner. It scraped along the siding and found every weak seam the house still had. Lydia woke before the stove cooled, before the clock finished its long circle. She lay still, listening, counting the small sounds that meant life continued. 2 breaths, 1 shallow, 1 steadier. Reed was awake too. She knew it by the way the room held itself. Men who slept easy didn't hold silence like that. "Coffee," she said, not turning her head. "Yes, ma'am." The kettle hissed. The stove flared. Dawn crept in thin and gray, barely enough to make shapes honest. Lydia sat up and pulled her boots on. She didn't look at Reed until he stood, twins strapped to his chest again, his coat buttoned wrong because his fingers were numb. "You keep them inside today," she said. "No barn, no bunkhouse." Reed hesitated. "The wood, I'll do it," Lydia cut in. He nodded once. He always did that. Like agreement was a kind of shelter. The knock came just after breakfast. Not hard. Not polite. Certain. Lydia was already on her feet, shotgun in hand. She didn't raise it. She didn't hide it either. She opened the door enough to be seen. Barton Hale stood on her porch like a man who had never waited in his life. Clean coat. Shined boots. Gloves still on despite the cold. Behind him, a wagon waited with a second figure leaning against it. Wes Hale, arms crossed, smile thin as wire. "Cousin," Barton said, voice warm as bread, just long enough to be insulting. "Morning." Lydia didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Barton?" His eyes flicked past her shoulder. He saw Reed. He saw the bundles. His mouth curved, satisfied. "Word travels," Barton said, "especially when it's unexpected." Lydia leaned against the doorframe, blocking the view. "You didn't come for weather." Barton smiled wider. "No, I came for paperwork." Wes pushed off the wagon and strolled closer, boots crunching frost. "Didn't know you took in drifters now, Lydia." Reed shifted behind her. Lydia felt it. She didn't turn. "They're not your concern," she said. Barton stepped forward until the porch boards creaked. "On the contrary, according to your father's deed, they very much are." He pulled folded paper from inside his coat, slow enough to enjoy it. He didn't hand it to her. He held it between them like a leash. "You remember the clause," Barton said gently. "Operating authority transfers if the property is deemed improperly managed, especially by an unmarried woman without—" His eyes slid toward Reed. "Appropriate oversight." Lydia didn't reach for the paper. "My books are clean." Barton chuckled. "Books don't mean much when people talk." Behind him, Wes laughed once. "Town's already talkin'." Lydia felt heat rise in her chest, sharp and unwelcome. She pushed it down where it belonged. "You want to inspect my land," she said. "You file notice." Barton shook his head. "No need. I'm family." "You're not welcome," Lydia replied. Silence fell, the kind that weighed. Reed stepped forward then, just enough to be seen. He didn't speak. He didn't glare. He simply stood between Lydia and the men, his body angled so the twins stayed behind his coat. Wes's smile turned ugly. "Who's that supposed to be?" "My employee," Lydia said flatly. "Paid labor." Barton raised a brow. "With infants?" "Yes." "That's irregular." "So was your last audit," Lydia shot back. "Still didn't stop you from losing it." Barton's smile thinned. "Careful." "I am." Barton folded the paper and tucked it away. "I'm giving you notice," he said. 7 days. After that, I'll petition the county to step in." "You do that," Lydia said. "I'll be ready." He tipped his hat, mockingly courteous. "I'm sure you will." They left without another word. The wagon rolled away. Frost rose behind it like smoke. Lydia shut the door and leaned her forehead against it for half a breath. Reed spoke quietly. "I can go." She turned on him. "No." "They won't stop," he said. "I know men like that." "So do I," Lydia replied. She moved past him, grabbed her coat. "And they stop when they're made to." She went to the barn. The firewood was heavy. Her hands burned. She welcomed it. Pain was honest. Paper wasn't. When she came back in, Reed had laid the twins down and swept the floor without being asked. He stood by the table, hat in hand, waiting. "You don't owe me this," he said. Lydia set the wood by the stove. "You work. I pay. That's the end of it." He studied her. "They'll say things." "They already are." He hesitated. "I don't want them saying you're unfit," Lydia finished. "They've been saying that since I learned how to count." Reed's jaw tightened. "I'll go to town," he said. "Explain." "No," Lydia said sharply. "You don't step foot there." "Ma'am, that's an order," she said, and the word ma'am fell between them like a door slammed shut. "You want to help? You stay where you are." He bowed his head. "Yes, ma'am." The afternoons stretched. Lydia sat at the table with her ledger open, ink staining her fingers. She wrote until the lines blurred. She checked numbers twice. She added dates. She noted repairs. She wrote Reed's name under labor, paid and unpaid, every hour accounted for. As dusk came, another sound joined the wind. Hooves. This time, Lydia didn't wait. She opened the door with the shotgun visible, stance firm. Sheriff Amos Ketter sat his horse easy, like a man who'd lived with weather and men long enough not to rush. He tipped his hat. "Evenin', Lydia." "Sheriff?" His eyes slid past her, careful. "Heard Barton Hale was out this way." "He was," Amos nodded. "He likes to stir." "He likes to steal," Lydia replied. Amos's mouth twitched. "That too." He dismounted and tied his horse. "Mind if I come in?" Lydia stepped aside. Amos took in the room with one slow glance. The babies, Reed, the ledger, the stove. He missed nothing. "You keepin' busy," he said. "Yes." Amos looked at Reed. "Name?" Read Callahan, Reed said evenly. Amos studied him. You running from something? Reed didn't answer right away. He looked at Lydia. She didn't give him permission. She didn't forbid him either. I'm running to something, Reed said at last. Warmth. Amos snorted softly. Fair answer. He turned to Lydia. Hale's asking questions down at the courthouse. Papers and such. My papers are in order. I don't doubt it, Amos said. But doubt don't stop petitions. Lydia closed her ledger. Then I'll see him in court. Amos held her gaze. You sure you want that? Yes. He nodded once. All right. He tipped his hat again and left without offering protection. That was Amos's way. He stood where law met weather and let the rest sort itself out. Night fell heavy. Reed fed the twins. Tobin coughed again, softer now, like the sound was losing its grip. Lydia sat nearby, counting drops, counting breaths. You ever pray? Reed asked suddenly, voice low. Lydia didn't look up. I used to. Reed nodded. I still do. She glanced at him then. His eyes were closed, lips moving, not begging, just asking for strength. For a moment, just one, Lydia let herself think it. Lord, don't make me choose wrong. She closed the thought away like she closed drawers, tight. Outside, the wind howled again. Somewhere down the ridge, a light flickered where it shouldn't have been. Lydia rose, shotgun in hand. The night was learning their shape, and it was patient. The light on the ridge was gone by morning. Either it had never been there, or someone had decided not to leave proof behind. Lydia preferred the second answer. It meant intention. Intention could be planned for. She woke to the sound of Reed moving quiet through the kitchen, boots in hand, coat already on. The twins slept near the stove, bundled close, their breathing soft but present. Reed had packed what little he owned into the satchel and set it by the door like a man laying out his sins where they could be counted. Lydia watched him from the table, her ledger open, ink already dark on the page. You're leaving, she said. Reed froze. He didn't turn around. Before the sun's up, he answered. I'll head west, away from town. You'll die, Lydia said. He nodded once. Maybe. You'll die with them, she added. That made him turn. His face was drawn, eyes red-rimmed from a night spent bargaining with God. If I stay, he said, they'll take your land, or worse. Lydia closed the ledger. The sound snapped clean through the room. If you leave, she said, they'll say I ran a man off, that I was hiding something. They'll come harder. Reed stepped closer, voice low. I've lived that story. It don't end well. Lydia stood. She crossed the room and picked up the satchel before he could reach it. She carried it past him, into the storage room, and shut the door. The key turned in the lock with a sound that ended arguments. Reed stared at the door. Ma'am. Lydia walked past him and did not slow. She went to the back wall, lifted the spare boards she kept stacked there, and dragged them across the floor with a shriek of wood on wood. She braced them against the inside of the back door, wedging it shut. Then he went outside. Reed followed, helpless, watching her work. She took the wagon wheel off its axle and rolled it into the shed. She dragged the ladder away from the fence line and laid it flat in the snow. She unhitched the old mare from the post and led her into the far stall, bolting the door behind her. Only when there was nothing left to move did Lydia turn back. "You're not running," she said. "Not today." Reed's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You don't know what you're holding." "I know exactly what I'm holding," Lydia replied. "A man who won't steal my money when he's hungry. A man who stands between me and other men without being asked. And 2 babies who won't survive another night on the road." Reed's jaw worked. "I don't want your trouble." "Too late," Lydia said. "You stepped on my land. That makes it mine to deal with." He looked at the house, at the windows, at the thin line of smoke rising from the chimney. "They'll burn it," he said quietly. Lydia met his gaze. "Then we'll know who they are." That stopped him. Inside, Lydia set Reed to work like there was no storm waiting. Fence. Posts were reset. Wire was tightened. The north wall of the house was checked for gaps and packed with rags and clay where the wind liked to bite through. Reed worked without complaint, moving with a purpose sharpened by being trapped. Lydia wrote while he worked. Every repair, every hour, every nail pulled and replaced. She signed his name beside the entries and made him sign too, his hand awkward with the pen, but steady enough to be believed. By midday, Reed had built a cradle from spare boards and rope, sturdy enough to rock without tipping. He tested it twice before setting the twins inside. Tate kicked and protested. Tobin slept, his breath easier now, like the fight had shifted a little in their favor. Lydia watched that breath, counted it. The sound of a horse came in the afternoon. Lydia felt it before she heard it, the way the land seemed to hold still. She stepped onto the porch, shotgun in the crook of her arm. Dorothea Pike rode in alone. Her horse lathered like it had come fast. She didn't dismount until she was close enough to speak without shouting. "He's in town," Dorothea said, voice tight. "Who?" Lydia asked. "A man from St. Louis," Dorothea replied. "Clean boots, clean hands, asking after a Callahan." Reed's head lifted from where he stood splitting wood. Lydia didn't look at him. "What else, Paso?" Lydia said. Dorothea swallowed. "He says he's offering help. Says there was a misunderstanding back east." Lydia's mouth curved without humor. "There always is." Dorothea leaned closer. "He's got a deadline." That did it. Deadlines were how men turned time into a weapon. "How long?" Lydia asked. 3 days, Dorothea said. "After that, he starts making noise." Reed dropped the axe into the snow. It stuck there, handle quivering. He walked toward Lydia, slow, careful, like approaching a skittish animal. "That's him," he said. "The one who follows." Lydia finally turned to him. "Name?" "Julian Croft," Reed said. "Sometimes he uses another." Dorothea's eyes narrowed. "I've heard of him." "He don't come for truth," Reed went on. "He comes for endings." Lydia nodded. "Then we don't give him one." Dorothea looked between them. "Court's in 2 days." "Then we go first," Lydia said, "before he turns talk into law." Dorothea hesitated. "That puts you both in the open." Lydia's voice didn't waver. "Better than being burned out quiet." Dorothea studied her, then nodded once. I'll spread word. The right kind. When Dorothea rode off, Reed stood with his hands open, empty. I should still go, he said, before this gets blood on your floor. Lydia shook her head. You go now. You confirm every lie they want to tell. He looked away. I don't want them using you. They already are, Lydia said. Difference is, now I'm watching. Night came early again. Lydia barred the doors and checked the windows twice. Reed sat by the stove, rocking the cradle with one foot, while his hands repaired a torn blanket stitch by stitch. His shoulders sagged, but he didn't stop. Why'd you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? Lock me in, he said. Tie your life to mine. Lydia watched the needle flash in the lamplight. Because men like Croft think fear makes people run, and men like Hale think women will fold. She met his eyes. They're wrong. Reed swallowed. If this ends bad, it will end, Lydia cut in. That's enough. Later, when the twins slept and the house creaked under the wind, Lydia sat alone at the table. She wrote until the ink ran low. Names, dates, proof. Outside, something moved along the fence line. Lydia saw the shadow pass and then disappear, careful not to leave tracks. She did not open the door. Inside, Reed whispered a prayer over his sons, voice barely there. I will not run again. Lydia heard it anyway, and for the first time since the knocking began, she understood the shape of the fight they were in. Not escape, endurance. The first of them began with ink. Lydia set the ledger flat on the table and weighted its corners with tools so the pages wouldn't curl. She sharpened 2 pencils to short, blunt points and laid them side by side like matched knives. Outside, the wind worried the eaves, testing what she had sealed the day before. Inside, the stove burned low and steady, the kind of fire that promised it would last if you treated it right. Read this, she said. Reed stood where she could see him, twins strapped to his chest, their weight settling him. She slid a page across the table. Numbers, dates, head counts, feed tallies, repairs logged in a hand too neat to argue with. He frowned. I ain't much for... Read it, Lydia said again, not louder. He read. His lips moved without sound. He stopped once, then went back slower. This says I worked 6 hours yesterday. You did. And 4 the day before. You did. And you paid me. Yes. He looked up. You didn't. I did, Lydia said. She reached into the tin and slid 3 coins across the wood. Not many. Real. Cash leaves a trail. Reed stared at the coins like they were a trick. Then he pushed them back. I don't need to... You need a record, Lydia cut in. So do I. He nodded and took the pencil. His name came out crooked, heavy-handed. She didn't correct him. Outside, a horse passed on the road. Lydia didn't look up. She listened to the sound fade and then told Reed to sign again on the next line. By mid-morning, the house had learned a new rhythm. Reed worked the yard under Lydia's eye. She moved between rooms, counting, checking, sealing. She wrapped extra cloth around the window frames and stuffed old shirts into the cracks behind the cupboards. She boiled water and poured it into bottles, tucked them beneath blankets near the cradle so warmth would hold even if the fire dipped. At noon, Dorothea Pike returned, this time on foot, her breath sharp with hurry. He's using the other name, she said before Lydia could ask. Which? Lydia replied. Dorothea told her. Lydia wrote it down. He's staying at the Whitcomb, Dorothea went on. Eating clean, talking slow. He says he's not here to trouble anyone. Says he's just offering folks a chance to do the right thing. Reed stood very still. What's the right thing? Lydia asked. Dorothea's mouth pressed thin. Depends who you ask. Lydia nodded. Then we'll ask on Thursday. Dorothea glanced at Reed. He's asking questions about babies. Reed's jaw tightened. What kind? Lydia asked. How old? When born? Who signed what? Lydia closed the ledger. Then we answer with paper. That afternoon, Reed brought out a folded receipt from his satchel, creased soft from being carried too long. Lydia took it, read the name at the top, and felt a cold settle behind her ribs. Rail money. She didn't ask. She tucked it into the ledger and wrote a note beside it. Exhibit. By dusk, the twins' breathing had evened out. Tobin coughed once and then stopped, his chest lifting in a steady rhythm that made Reed sag with relief he didn't know how to hide. Lydia noticed and said nothing. The knock came after dark. This one was soft, measured. Lydia took the shotgun anyway. She opened the door a hand's width. The man on her porch wore a clean coat and gloves that had never known frost. His hat was new enough to still remember its shape. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. Evening, he said. Miss Ashford, I presume. You presume wrong, Lydia said. State your business. My name's Julian Croft, he replied, pleasant as a hymn. I'm here on a matter of confusion. Reed moved behind her. Lydia didn't look back. There's a man traveling with infants, Croft continued. I'm told he stopped here. Lots of men travel, Lydia said. Croft smiled wider. Not with twins. Not in November. His eyes slid past her shoulder. He saw the cradle, the blankets. He saw Reed's shadow on the wall. I'm offering a choice, Croft said. You hand him over, quietly, tonight even, and this all goes away. Lydia held his gaze. And if I don't? Croft's smile stayed. Then I start asking louder questions. You need a warrant, Lydia said. Croft's eyes flickered. Just once. Not for conversation. Behind her, Reed breathed in. Lydia felt it, felt the weight of the decision like a hand on her spine. Come back in daylight, she said, with paper. Croft tipped his hat. 3 days, he said. After that, daylight won't matter. He stepped back into the dark and was gone without hurry. Lydia shut the door and barred it. Reed spoke first. I'll go. No, Lydia said. They'll make it ugly. Yes, Lydia said. They will. He stepped closer. You don't owe me this. She met his eyes. You owe me nothing. That's why you're staying. He swallowed. If he says, he can say whatever he likes, Lydia cut in. We'll answer what matters. The second day came with snow. It fell in clean sheets that hid tracks and softened edges, the kind of snow that made the world look honest while it was lying to you. Lydia watched it from the window and felt the clock start to move faster. They went to town before noon. Lydia drove the wagon herself. Reed sat beside her, twins bundled between them like a fragile truth no one could afford to drop. Heads turned as they passed. Conversations thinned. Eyes followed. At the courthouse, Barton Hale waited. He smiled when he saw the babies. "You're bold," he said. "I'm prepared," Lydia replied. Croft stood near the door, hands folded, watching like a man enjoying a play he'd already read. Inside, Lydia laid her ledger on the desk. She laid receipts beside it. She laid Reed's signed hours in a neat stack. She did not rush. Barton spoke first. Croft listened. Lydia waited. When it was her turn, she stood and spoke in numbers. She spoke in dates. She spoke in ink. The judge leaned forward. Croft's smile thinned. Outside, as they left, Croft stepped close enough that Lydia could smell soap on him. "You're holding him too tight," he said softly. "Men break when you pull like that." Lydia didn't stop walking. "You should worry about your own grip." That night, the barn burned. Lydia smelled it before she saw it. Smoke, sharp, wrong, cutting through the snow. She ran without thinking, shotgun forgotten by the door. Reed was already moving, the twins in his arms. The barn was a torch, flames licking high, boards popping like gunfire. Lydia grabbed Reed's sleeve and yanked him back as the roof gave in with a sound like the world ending. "They're erasing proof," Reed said hoarsely. Lydia nodded. "I know." By morning, only black bones remained. Ash drifted across the snow like a verdict. A letter waited on the church door, sealed in black. Lydia read it once and folded it away. 3 days, Reed said. "No," Lydia replied. 1. She turned back toward the house, smoke still clinging to her coat, and began to plan the end of it. Somewhere, a clock struck, and the snow kept falling, faithful as a prayer. Morning came brittle and bright, the kind of cold that made sound carry too far. The barn's skeleton stood black against the snow, ribs showing, ash drifting where hay had been. Lydia didn't look at it long. She had learned that grief took more than it gave if you stared. She fed the stove. She checked the windows. She packed water and bandages into a sack without explaining why. Reed watched, twins bundled close, their breaths small and steady. Tobin coughed once and stopped. Tate kicked like he resented the quiet. "Town," Lydia said. Reed stiffened. "Now?" "Yes. They'll be waiting. They already are." They rode in the wagon because walking would have looked like fear. Lydia held the reins. Reed sat beside her, shoulders squared, one hand cupped around the baby's blankets to keep the wind from stealing what warmth remained. Snow squeaked under the wheels. Heads turned. Voices dipped. At the edge of Main Street, Mrs. Dorothea Pike waited like she had been there all her life. She fell in step without asking. "They burned your barn," she said, loud enough for anyone close to hear. "That's not how neighbors behave." Lydia didn't answer. She drove. At the courthouse steps, Barton Hale stood with his hands in his pockets, smile arranged like furniture. Wes leaned against the rail, eyes sharp, and near the door, Julian Croft, clean as ever, gloves folded, patience worn like a badge. "Miss Ashford," Croft said, "I was hoping you'd reconsider." Lydia didn't slow. "Move." Croft's smile didn't reach his eyes. He stepped aside. Inside, the room was already warm with bodies and opinions. Sheriff Amos Ketter stood near the wall, hat low, watching. The judge took his seat with a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Barton spoke first. He always did. "Your Honor," Barton said, voice smooth. "This is an unfortunate situation brought on by poor management. My cousin—" "Objection," Lydia said, calm and clear. "Opinion." A murmur rippled. The judge glanced at her, surprised, then nodded. "Sustained." Lydia laid her ledger on the table. She laid the receipts. She laid Reed's signed hours. She laid the folded receipt with rail money letterhead half hidden, just enough to be seen without being understood. "I operate Ashford Ridge," Lydia said. "I do so lawfully. I keep books. I pay labor. I pay tax. I have witnesses." She didn't look at Reed when she said the last part. She looked at Dorothea. Dorothea stepped forward. "I've known this land 30 years, she said. "I've seen the books. They're cleaner than most men's hands." Barton smiled thin. "And the infants?" "They are not evidence," Lydia said. "They are people." Croft leaned in, voice gentle. "Your Honor, there's reason to believe those children were taken unlawfully." The room tightened. Reed felt it like a rope around his chest. The judge looked at Reed. "Sir," Reed stood. He did not step back. He did not step forward. He stood where he was. "I brought my sons here to keep them alive," Reed said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. "I worked for shelter. I signed for pay. I didn't steal." Croft smiled. "Names?" "Tate. Tobin." "And their mother?" Reed's jaw set. "Dead." "How?" Reed looked at Lydia. She didn't nod. She didn't stop him. "She was hurt," Reed said, "by a man who thought his name made him untouchable." A breath held. Croft's eyes flickered. "That man fell," Reed went on. "He hit his head. He died. I ran because men like him don't die alone." Croft's smile thinned to a line. "Convenient." Lydia spoke. "What's convenient is burning barns to erase proof." The judge leaned forward. "Is there evidence of arson?" Sheriff Amos stepped away from the wall. "Yes, sir," he said. "Tracks led from the ridge. Clean boots. Not farm work." Croft's head turned a fraction. Barton's smile faltered. "Enough," the judge said. "This court will not adjudicate rumors." Lydia slid one more paper forward. Not the rail receipt. Not yet. "This is a petition to inspect Ashford Ridge," she said. "Open, today, by the county. I have nothing to hide." Barton sputtered. Croft's eyes sharpened. The judge nodded. "Granted." Outside, the cold bit harder. A small crowd followed, pulled by heat and hunger for spectacle. Lydia walked at the front. Reed followed with the babies. Dorothea kept pace. Sheriff Amos brought up the rear. At the ridge, smoke still ghosted the air. Lydia pointed. "That was my barn." They moved through the house, the bunkhouse, the yard. Lydia opened cupboards, lifted lids, counted water, counted feed. Reed brought the ledger and pointed to the empty lines where the barn's measures had been. "They burned what proved I could feed," Lydia said. "Not what proves I tried." Croft circled like a cat. "You're holding a wanted man." "Show me paper," Lydia said. Croft didn't. The inspection ended with nothing gained and nothing lost except patience. The crowd drifted. Barton left with his jaw tight. Croft lingered. 3 days, he said again, softly. Clock's still running. Lydia met his eyes. So is mine. That night, the letter went up. Black wax on the church door. No name, no flourish, just a promise written crooked. Hand over Reed Callahan, or the house goes next. The town read it before the snow could hide it. Whispers moved faster than feet. Lydia took the letter down herself. She folded it once and tucked it into her coat. She did not burn it. She brought it to Sheriff Amos. He read it and exhaled through his nose. They want to make an example. They will, Lydia said, just not the one they think. Back at the house, Reed stood by the stove, twins asleep, their mouths soft and pink. He watched Lydia set boards by the windows and string wire across the back path. "You can still turn me out," he said. Lydia shook her head. "You leave, they learn fear works. They'll come riding." "Yes," he swallowed. "With guns." "Yes." Reed nodded once. "Then I stay." They worked until their hands ached. Reed dug a shallow trench around the house and packed it with snow and dirt. Lydia soaked blankets and laid them by the doors. She set lanterns low where shadows would lie to her favor. Near midnight, Dorothea came again, breath white, eyes bright. "Red scarves," she whispered. "I saw them at the edge of town." Lydia didn't look up from tying a knot. "How many?" "Enough." Reed kissed his sons' foreheads once each. He did not linger. When the hooves came, they came together. The sound rolled up the ridge like thunder learning a name. Lydia took her place at the window. Reed stood at her shoulder. Sheriff Amos and Eli Mercer took cover by the fallen barn timbers, guns drawn, faces set. A voice carried through the night. "Reed Callahan." Lydia answered instead. "Show your papers." Laughter followed. Then the crack of a match. A bottle shattered against the fence and fire bloomed, bright and sudden. Reed fired once. Warning, not to kill. The riders fanned out, scarves dark against snow. Eli shouted and went down, blood bright on white. Amos dragged him back, cursing. The house shook as something struck the door. Lydia fired through the window frame, splinters flying. A rider fell. Another cursed. Smoke thickened. Fire licked the soaked blankets and died, frustrated. Reed moved like the night had taught him. He covered the door. He covered the window. He covered the children with his body when a shot cracked too close. "Now!" Lydia shouted. Amos blew the whistle Dorothea had brought. The sound sharp and ugly. From the far ridge, lanterns answered. More men. Neighbors who had seen too much. The riders hesitated. Hesitation got them moving. They broke and ran, hooves tearing snow, scarves flashing once before the dark swallowed them whole. Silence came back wrong. Too loud. Eli groaned. He lived. Lydia lowered the gun and felt her hands shake for the first time. She let it happen. Inside, the twins slept on, unaware of how close the night had come. Outside, the town stood in the cold and learned a lesson it would pretend to forget. Lydia closed the door and barred it. Home, she thought. Not as a prayer this time, but as a fact paid for in smoke and blood. And somewhere beyond the ridge, someone counted the cost and did not like the sum. Tiep tuk fan sao. The town didn't sleep after the riders broke. It pretended to. Morning found tracks half buried where hooves had torn the snow, and neighbors had stood too close to fear to admit it. Smoke still clung to coats. Lydia washed blood from the porch boards with water gone pink, then clear, then pink again, until the grains stopped remembering. Eli Mercer lived. That mattered. Sheriff Amos said it twice, like saying it enough times might keep the night from taking something else. They went back to town because staying home would have looked like hiding. Lydia drove. Reed walked beside the wagon this time, twins bundled and strapped to his chest, his pace measured so the babies didn't jolt. Heads turned. People looked at his hands now, not his boots. Looked at the bandage on Eli's arm when the sheriff passed. Looked at Lydia's coat, still smelling of smoke. At the courthouse steps, Barton Hale waited again, less smiling, more stiff. Julian Croft stood off to one side, clean as ever, eyes sharpened by a night that hadn't gone his way. Inside, the judge called the room to order with a voice hoarse from too much of everything. "Proceed," he said. Barton rose first, papers trembling just enough to be noticed. "Your Honor, last night's violence proves my concern. This property has become a hazard." "Objection," Lydia said. "Speculation." The judge nodded. "Sustained." Croft stepped forward, palms open. "Your Honor, my client merely wishes to ensure the safety of 2 infants. There is reason to believe—" "Show paper," Lydia said. Croft smiled. "We will." He laid a document on the table. It slid like a blade. Lydia didn't touch it. "What is it?" the judge asked. "A statement," Croft replied, attesting that Reed Callahan unlawfully removed his children from Missouri jurisdiction following a fatal altercation. A murmur rippled. Reed felt the rope tighten. Lydia reached for her ledger. "Before we hear statements," she said, calm as snowfall, "I request the court note that my barn was burned in an act of arson intended to destroy evidence of lawful operation." The judge leaned forward. "Evidence?" Lydia opened the ledger and turned pages until ink spoke. "Feed tallies, repairs, hours logged, receipts." She slid the folded rail receipt forward just enough this time. "And this." Croft's eyes flickered. Barton's mouth tightened. The judge picked it up, read the letterhead, then looked over his glasses. "Rail money," he said. Lydia nodded. "Paid to a family whose name appears on Mr. Croft's statement." Silence pressed in. Croft laughed softly. "Coincidence." "Perhaps," Lydia said. "Then perhaps the court would like to see the telegrams." Dorothea Pike stood and handed them up, copies pulled by Favors Ode. The judge read, his jaw set. "Mr. Croft," the judge said, "you will explain why you are receiving funds from parties seeking to influence proceedings. Here." Croft's smile thinned. "I provide services." The judge set the papers down. "You will step back." Croft did. He did not look pleased. Barton tried again. "Regardless, Your Honor, the deed," Lydia said, and her voice cut clean, "requires mismanagement. I submit an open inspection again today, with witnesses." The judge nodded. Granted. Outside, the inspection was faster this time. The town had seen enough. Lydia opened doors. Reed lifted lids. Dorothea counted. Amos watched hands. When it was done, the judge spoke plain. Ashford Ridge remains under Miss Ashford's authority. Barton's shoulders sagged. Croft's eyes sharpened. Reed stood quiet through it all, twins breathing warm against him. When Croft moved close, Reed felt it like winter stepping inside. Name, Croft said softly. Reed Callahan. Croft nodded. You can still end this. Reed looked at Lydia. She didn't look back. I end it by staying, Reed said. Croft's mouth flattened. Then we'll see. They left under a sky gone thin and hard. Lydia didn't breathe easy. She never did when men promised patience. At home they worked. They rebuilt what mattered. Not the barn yet. Too big, too loud. But fences, locks, light. Lydia buried a tin beneath the kitchen floor and set a copy of the ledger inside. She gave Dorothea another copy wrapped in oilcloth. If anything happens, Lydia said. Dorothea nodded. I'll remember. That night, Lydia sat at the table with the ledger open and a candle burning low. Reed mended a coat by lamplight, needle flashing. The twins slept, their breath even, small chests rising together like they'd learned how to do it on purpose. You should hate me, Reed said suddenly. Lydia didn't look up. Why? For bringing this. She closed the ledger. I hated men who thought they could take first. He watched her. And now? Now I keep count, she said. Outside, a horse passed and did not stop. Lydia stood, checked the locks, then returned to the table. She wrote until the candle guttered. When she blew it out, the room held its shape. Somewhere, Croft counted days again, and Lydia counted breaths. The clock kept time for both of them. The barn stayed black against the snow, even when the wind tried to soften it. Lydia walked its edge at dawn, boots crunching ash frozen into the ground, and stopped where the beam had fallen. She bent, lifted a charred nail between her fingers, and dropped it into her pocket. Not sentiment. Inventory. Reed stood a little ways back with the twins bundled close. He didn't cross the line Lydia drew with her eyes. He had learned where she needed quiet. Not today, she said without turning. I know, he replied. They went back to the house and set to work on smaller things, the kind that kept life from unraveling while the big repairs waited. Lydia reset the hinges on the back door. Reed stacked stones to shore up the low wall where the wind liked to cut. They moved around each other without speaking much, the way people do when words would slow the hands. By mid-morning, Dorothea Pike arrived with bread and news. Barton's packing, she said. Not leaving town, just putting things away. Men don't pack without reason, Lydia said. Dorothea nodded. Croft's still at the Whitcomb. He's quieter. That's worse, Reed said. Dorothea looked at him. Sheriff Amos sent word. He's calling for riders from the south. Not deputies. Neighbors. Lydia set the hinge pin and wiped her hands. Good. Dorothea hesitated. There's talk of rebuilding. Barn later, Lydia said. House first. Dorothea smiled faintly. That's how women keep land. After Dorothea left, Lydia brought out a bundle of boards she'd been saving. Straight, dry, good. Reed took them without comment and began framing a smaller structure near the house, far enough from the old barn's bones to avoid ghosts. He worked steady, measuring twice, cutting once, setting each piece like it would be judged. Tate fussed when the saw sang. Tobin slept through it, breath even now, like his lungs had learned the trick. By afternoon, a wagon creaked up the drive. Sheriff Amos climbed down alone, hat low. "Croft's papers are being questioned," he said. "Not enough to run him out. Enough to slow him." "And Hale?" Lydia asked. Amos spat into the snow. "Quiet. That never lasts." He looked at Reed. "You hold your ground." Reed nodded. "Yes, sir." Amos turned to Lydia. "You do the same." She met his gaze. "Always." Night came with a pale moon and a cold that cracked boards. Lydia lit the lamps and set one low by the door, another at the window where shadows could be counted. Reed finished the frame and stepped back, hands sore, shoulders slumped. "It'll hold," he said. "For now," Lydia replied. They ate in near silence. Reed fed the twins drop by drop, careful not to spill. Lydia watched the rhythm, lift, wait, swallow, counting like she always did. After, Reed stood by the cradle, not rocking, just being there. "I used to think running was a kind of prayer," he said quietly. Lydia didn't answer at first. She wrote a line in the ledger and closed it. "And now," she said. "And now I think staying is," Reed replied. She looked at him then. His eyes were tired, honest. Outside, a horse stopped on the road. No knock followed. The rider waited, then moved on. Lydia marked the time in her head. Later, when the house had settled and the twins slept, Lydia lifted the floorboard and checked the tin. Dry. Safe. She slid it back and pressed the board down until it fit, like it had always belonged. A sound came from the ridge, metal against metal. A signal answered farther off. Lydia rose, shotgun in hand. Reed was there beside her without asking. They waited. The sound did not come closer. It did not retreat either. It hung, a promise that the night hadn't finished speaking. At dawn, a note lay at the fence post. Not sealed this time. No wax. Just a scrap weighed with a stone. Last chance. Lydia read it once and folded it clean. Reed watched her face. "We don't answer," he said. "No," Lydia agreed. "We count." By noon, men arrived. Not riders with scarves, but neighbors with tools. Hammers, shovels, boards. They didn't speak much. They didn't ask for thanks. They worked. Lydia handed out nails. Reed lifted beams. Dorothea kept tally and passed water. The house grew a skin of fresh wood. The small frame became a shed. Then something more. Useful, solid, honest. From the road, Croft watched. Clean coat, clean gloves. He stood a long time, eyes measuring. Lydia stepped forward and met him at the fence. "You're losing," she said. Croft smiled thin. "I'm patient." "So am I," Lydia replied. He glanced at the men working, at the babies in the cradle by the open door, watched over by 3 women who took turns without being asked. "People remember," Croft said. "They remember what stands," Lydia said. He tipped his hat and left. That evening, when the light went gold and the wind eased, Lydia set the last board in place herself. Reed held it steady. "Not a barn," he said. "No," she replied. "A beginning." He nodded, understanding more than she'd said. They stood together a moment, hands still on the wood, listening to the land breathe. Inside, the twins slept, mouths soft, chests rising together. Outside, the ridge watched, and Lydia, for the first time since the knocking began, felt the weight shift, not gone, not light, but balanced enough to carry another day. The wire sang before dawn. It was a thin sound, almost polite, the kind that could be missed if a man was already tired. Lydia heard it because she slept light now. She swung her feet to the floor and was moving before the second hum reached the house. Reed was up too. No words. He took the back door. She took the front. The telegraph boy stood stiff in the cold, cap pulled low, cheeks raw. He handed the slip over like it burned. 3 days. Come willingly. Keep it quiet. No signature. Lydia folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket. "You can go," she told the boy, and pressed a coin into his hand that was more than fair. When the door closed, Reed said, "That's Croft." "Yes." "He wants me in town." "Yes." He waited for the rest. She set water to heat. "We don't give him what he wants." Reed leaned against the table. "If I go, it ends." "If you go," Lydia said, "it only changes where it ends." The kettle sang. She poured and didn't look at him. "I won't have this place burned again," he said. She met his eyes then. "Nor will I trade you to keep it standing." Silence settled, thick and careful. "I should tell you everything," Reed said. "You should tell me what matters," Lydia replied. He breathed out through his nose. "I didn't kill him." "I know." "I hit him," Reed said. "Hard." "I know." "He fell," Reed continued. "Hit stone. Lived 2 days. His brother paid men to forget that part." Lydia nodded once. "That matters." "It will come here," he said. "It already has," she answered. She slid the ledger across the table and opened it to a page marked with a strip of cloth. Names, dates, numbers, the clean truth of work. "I'm going to town," Lydia said. Reed's jaw tightened. "Alone?" "Yes." He shook his head. "No." She lifted a hand. "You stay with the boys. That's how we keep one thing safe while we risk another." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll watch the ridge." She pulled on her coat and hat, tucked the paper deeper into her pocket, and stepped out into the cold that bit like it wanted blood. Town was already awake in the way it gets when trouble is expected. Doors open, voices low. Lydia went first to the feed store, then the bank. She didn't plead. She asked questions. She wrote answers down. She paid what she owed and took receipts that still smelled of ink. At the Whitcomb, Croft's door stood open. She stopped on the threshold. "I won't come in," she said. Croft smiled from the chair by the window. "Suit yourself." "You're being paid twice," Lydia said. "Once by a family with money, once by fear." He shrugged. "I like tidy work." "Then you should tidy your books," she replied, and set a folded copy of a wire on the sill. The names weren't all there. Enough were. Croft's eyes flicked. Just once. Careful. I am, Lydia said. That's the point. She turned, away before he could answer. At the courthouse, Dorothea waited with a bundle under her arm. Sheriff Amos joined them, face drawn. "You're lighting a fire," he said. "No," Lydia replied. "I'm letting people see smoke." Amos sighed. "I can slow him." "Do," Lydia said. 3 days. At home, Reed worked the fence line until his hands went numb. He stopped often, listening. He carried the twins when the wind cut hard, walking the length of the house like a watch. A rider appeared near noon and turned away when Reed raised the shotgun. Another passed at dusk and did the same. No scarves, no signals. That night, Lydia returned with snow in her hair and something hard in her eyes. "They'll try again," she said. "When?" Reed asked. "Soon," she replied. "Before the wire can speak." They ate. They checked locks. They counted water. They laid out blankets wet near the door and dry near the cradle. "I'm not afraid," Reed said, and then softer. "I am." She nodded. "Me too." They slept in turns. The second day broke with a sky the color of tin. The sound came at mid-morning, hooves, more than one, stopping just beyond the line where the land dipped. Reed stepped onto the porch. Lydia stood behind him, rifle ready. 3 riders waited at the edge of the clearing. No scarves yet. The lead man lifted a hand. "Caleb Walker," he called, using a name that wasn't Reed's but fit well enough to wound. Reed didn't answer. "We're here to keep this quiet," the man said. "You come with us. Nobody gets hurt." Lydia stepped forward. "Show papers." The man smiled without warmth. "We don't need them." Sheriff Amos came out from behind the shed, rifle raised. "You do here." The riders looked at one another, calculated. The lead man tipped his hat. "Soon," he said, and they turned away. Reed exhaled. They were measuring. "Yes," Lydia said, "and they learned something." "What?" "That we won't run," she replied. That afternoon, neighbors came again. Fewer tools, more guns. They didn't stay long. They took positions. They waited. At dusk, Dorothea brought soup and news. "Croft's packing," she said. "Not leaving town." "He's bait," Lydia said. "Or a bell," Dorothea answered. The bell rang after dark. A shot cracked from the south fence, then another. Reed moved before Lydia could speak. "No," she said, sharp. He stopped, turned back, and nodded. He took the shotgun and held. The house shook when the door was tested. Lydia fired once into the ground near the post. The sound answered from the ridge. The riders came then, scarves red now, horses breathing steam. "Last chance," a voice called. Lydia stepped into the light. "No." The first flame arced and died in the snow. The second caught on wet cloth and hissed out. A third flew high and vanished. Shots answered. Wood splintered. Glass burst. Reed dragged the twins into the Yves-Saint-Fond. Crawl space beneath the kitchen floor, wrapped them tight, whispered a prayer he'd learned young and never used. "I won't run," he thought. "I won't." Outside, Amos shouted orders. Dorothea fired from the orchard, calm as Sunday. A man fell near the fence and did not get up. Another limped, leaving a dark line. The riders pulled back, not fast, not slow, angry. Silence followed, thick and ringing. When Lydia counted heads, everyone she loved still breathed. The house stood, scarred, standing. The third day dawned quiet. A wagon arrived with a man in a federal coat and a badge that caught the light. He listened. He looked at the wire copies Lydia laid out. He nodded. By noon, Croft was gone. Not arrested. Removed. Barton Hale didn't come. That evening, Lydia sat at the table and wrote until her hand cramped. Reed watched the ridge, shotgun across his knees. When the twins slept, Lydia placed a key on the table between them. "Stay," she said. Reed didn't pick it up. He touched it, then left it there. "I will." Outside, the land held its breath. Inside, the fire burned steady, and for the first time in days, it felt like enough. Morning didn't come gentle. It came flat and bright, like it meant to show everything that had happened and dare them to deny it. Lydia stepped out first. She counted boards split, windows cracked, fence posts scarred by lead. She knelt by the place where a rider had fallen and pressed 2 fingers to the ground, feeling for warmth that wasn't there anymore. Then she stood and moved on. Reed brought the twins out into the sun for a moment, just long enough to let their faces warm. Tate blinked and reached. Tobin slept, mouth open, breath soft. Reed adjusted the wrap and turned his body to block the wind by habit. Sheriff Amos rode in slow, one arm bound. He dismounted with a hiss and waved off help. "They'll tell it crooked in town," he said, "but they'll tell it." Dorothea followed with a basket and a look like iron. "Church doors don't forget nails," she said. "Neither do people." A man in a federal coat walked the line, quiet as a shadow. He asked for names. Lydia gave times. Reed pointed to places. No speeches, no pleading. By noon, the neighbors drifted back to their lives. The guns went home. The work stayed. Reed set to repairing the worst of it without being asked. He cut glass clean, set boards true, tamped posts until they rang. Lydia worked beside him, measuring, marking, tightening. When they crossed paths, they didn't stop. "I should say," Reed began once. "Later," Lydia said. They ate standing up. They drank water cold from the pump. The land watched. In the afternoon, a rider came without a scarf. He brought a paper folded twice. "From the courthouse, he said, eyes flicking to the house. Filed. Lydia took it and read. Her face didn't change. "It's done," she said. Reed waited. "The deed stands," she added. "No transfer, no guardian clause." He let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. "That doesn't end it," he said. "No," Lydia agreed, "but it changes who gets to speak." Toward evening, Lydia went to the old barn bones and chose what could be saved. She pulled nails free, stacked beams that still rang solid when struck. Reed joined her with a pry bar and said nothing. "I won't build it the same," she said. "I wouldn't," he replied. They worked until the sun dipped and the cold came back. When they stopped, there was a shape on the ground that could become something else. Inside, Dorothea rocked Tate while Lydia stitched a torn sleeve. Tobin woke and cried once. Reed crossed the room without looking and lifted him, the sound stopping as if it had been taught. Dorothea watched them both. People will call this stubborn, she said. People call weather mean, Lydia replied. Doesn't stop it. That night, Lydia set the lamps lower. Reed sat on the floor by the cradle, back to the wall, shotgun within reach. He didn't sleep. I'm done running, he thought. I'm done. A knock came after midnight. Not heavy, not afraid. Lydia took the door alone. Sheriff Amos stood there, hat in his hands. They found Croft, he said. On the road, alive, walking away. Good, Lydia said. He won't be back, Amos added. Not here. She nodded. After he left, Lydia leaned against the door for a moment longer than necessary. Then she straightened and went back to the table. Tomorrow, she said to Reed, we start fresh. He looked up. Together? She set a key down between them. If you want. Reed took it this time. He didn't pocket it. He turned it in his fingers like it might bite, then set it on the hook by the door where it belonged. I do, he said. Outside, the ridge went dark. No signals, no horses. Inside, the fire settled into a steady burn. Lydia sat and wrote a new heading in the ledger, clean and simple. Reed watched the door and listened to the breathing of two small lives that had made all the difference. When sleep finally came, it came light. Enough. And the house held. The first snow of Christmas fell thin and honest, the kind that didn't hide what lay beneath it. Lydia stood at the window and watched it touch the new boards without asking permission. Reed was already outside. He moved with a hammer in his hand and a pencil tucked behind his ear, marking where the frame needed bracing. He worked the way men do when they mean to stay, careful, quiet, unwilling to waste a good piece of wood. Inside, the twins lay near the stove. Tate watched the flame like it was telling him a story. Tobin slept with one fist curled tight, breathing easy. Lydia checked their chests without thinking. Counted. Always counted. She stepped out onto the porch and handed Reed a mug. Burnt, she said. He took it and smiled. Perfect. They stood a moment, steam rising from their cups, breath white in the cold. The land stretched out before them, scarred but open, like it had decided to give them another day. A wagon rolled up the drive just after noon. Dorothea climbed down with a bundle wrapped in red twine. Church ladies, she said. They won't say it's from them. They'll say it's from God. Lydia took the bundle. I won't argue. Dorothea glanced at the frame rising near the house. Not a barn. No, Lydia said. A home, Dorothea replied, satisfied. She lingered, rocking Tobin once, then left without ceremony. Later, the sheriff rode by, slower than usual. He tipped his hat and kept going. No speeches, no warnings. The afternoon passed in pieces. Reed set the last brace. Lydia swept the floor. They moved around each other like people who knew the shape of the room without measuring. At dusk, Lydia brought out a small box. She opened it on the table and set its contents down one by one. A key, a folded paper, a ribbon with a brass button stitched to it, worn smooth. They're mother's, Reed said. Yes. She slid the ribbon toward him. You keep it. He hesitated, then tied it to the cradle where it could be seen and not lost. When the light went low, Lydia lit a single candle and set it in the window. Outside, the snow caught its glow and held it. They ate together. Nothing fancy. Enough. After, Reed stood by the door, listening to the quiet like it might change its mind. Lydia sat at the table and wrote the date in the ledger. She paused, then added a line beneath it. Not numbers. A name. She closed the book. I won't ask you to stay because of what might come, she said. I know, Reed replied. I won't promise what I can't keep. I know. She slid the paper across the table. It was a contract. Plain. Fair. Reed read it twice. Signed once. When he handed it back, his hand shook. Just a little. I thought home was a thing you outran, he said. Lydia took the paper and folded it clean. It's a thing you stand inside. The twins stirred. Reed crossed the room and lifted Tate, then Tobin, one arm each. Awkward and right all at once, Lydia watched the way he adjusted without being told. Outside, a horse moved on the road and didn't stop. The night settled. The wind found other places to bother. Lydia opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Reed followed. The boys wrapped close. Snow touched their hair and melted. She said nothing. He said nothing. For a moment, the world felt held. Years later, someone would ask how it started, why she hadn't shut the door, why he hadn't kept running. Lydia would say only that the cold had been honest, and so had they. Reed would smile and look at the land. Inside, the fire burned steady, and that was enough.